Welcome back for another adventure with the Historical Conquest Adventure Box podcast. That's right, we are here to talk about history. Not just any history. Right now we're talking about ancient American history. And not just North America, we're actually talking about South America. We already spent a ton of time up in North America. Then we spent a good amount of time in Central America. Now we are talking about South America. And when you're in the United States, they don't talk about it as much as they really should, because it's fascinating. There is so much that goes on down in South America during the time of like 0 BC, 0 AD to about the time that Columbus comes. And there's a lot of different tribes. And there's actually earlier ones as well, back to the like 2600 BC. So we're going to be talking about a lot of these different groups all throughout. Now, we already talked about the Incas. We spent some time on that. That was 2 days ago. Yesterday, we talked about the Mapuche. Now, interesting enough, I wanted to tell you some of the things I learned about the Mapuche. As I said, I'm still studying them because, truthfully, I didn't know much about them at all. I knew that there was battles with some of the native tribes down in Argentina and Chile, but I never knew what they were. That's actually one of the things that got me interested in investigating into that. And so here's what I found. Here's some additional things. Now, this is, again, not during ancient American history. This is more around the Age of Exploration, when the Europeans came in. Do you know how they took on the Europeans? Of course, Europeans had guns. They had ironwork. They had horses. Horses. Yeah, they had everything in order to beat these people to submission. But the reason why they could never be taken over, the Mapuche, one, again, like I mentioned yesterday, they were decentralized. They were all over the place. They did not have a central government, much like the Incas, who controlled a lot of the tribes around them. No, the Mapuche was a decentralized organization. But in times of war, in times of opposition, they would join together. And they were a strong wall against everyone else that tried to come in and take them. Okay, so here's some things also to know of how that happened. What happened when they started going against the Incas? Well, they found the Incas' strategies, their stratagem, their tactics, their weapons, and they copied them. They were like amazing mimics of technology. They found other people doing technology, they made it themselves. If it would help, again, with their survival. Everything built around the Native Americans, being North, Central, and South America, were all based on technology advancements that had to do with survival. So, in this way, as soon as they found out that the Europeans were using iron, they learned how to make iron tools and iron weapons. Not to say guns and gunpowder, but swords and other things, and they could smelt them right there. There was iron ore in them hills. The hills of Chile, of Argentina. They could actually make these things, and they would capture them from the Spanish, mimic them, or use them in battle. What else did they take from the Spanish and then use against them in war? Well, the number one thing that gave them the biggest advantage, it wasn't the guns. It was the horses. They became master horsemen. They were highly skilled horsemen. They knew how to ride, especially in the terrain that they were in. Because remember, their terrain is very much different than Spain. And we're talking about Incas. They were up in the Andes. They were up in the mountains. The Mapuche were not in the high up mountains, but they had different terrain than Spain had. So when they can take the horses, breed the horses, grow new horses, and train them on the area that they lived, new horses coming over from Spain could not match up to them because they were not used to taking on that terrain. So they mimicked and modified for their survival. That's exactly what they do these days with some of their protest tactics and such. They learn from others and they use it against the Argentine and the Chilean governments. What else? So there was a cultural syncretism, adaptability. So, despite the resistance to conquer, they're highly adapted to incorporate elements of European technology. So, not just the weapons did they copy, but the tools when it came to farming, they were able to do that. When it came to, like I said before, the weapons, they were able to learn and mimic them. They were very highly intelligent for their survival. And so they were able to, again, fight the Spanish and keep them out of their lands. The last one that I wanted to tell you about is actually about their rich spiritualism. Now, a lot of the spiritualism has to do with the earth. But interesting enough, they believe in a single God. They believe in a supreme being. They call him, and this, I'm going to butcher it. Sorry, I do apologize. It's Ngenecchen. Genetchen. Sorry, something like that. And they also had spiritual leaders, which our archaeologists call shaman. So because it has a religious leader, but just as much as any religion has a single person that looks over a tribe or a congregation. So not shaman in the way of witchcraft, but shaman in the way of a spiritual leader. So this is all very interesting when it came to mimicry, when it comes to tools and advancements, but also keeping strong to their religious base. So they try to stay in tune with nature when it comes to their religion as well. So their religion and their nature coincide. You might say that most Christians are very much pro the environment, not in the sense of global warming and some of the political things, but are the biggest conservationists. They want to preserve the animals. They don't want ruthless killing of things. So these people that are Christian are very much about nature because God is what gave them that nature. Same thing with the Mapuche. There's their supreme being, God, and he gave them nature. And so they actually live by it. And some of the stories and the legends are based on different things that the God did for them, such as I shared it yesterday, pushing his two sons that wanted to conquer and destroy the world, pushed them from heaven. They fell down and made two large lakes, which we looked at yesterday. Okay, so if you missed that, please go back to our podcast yesterday. Okay, what else? Now, I told you about the Mapuche, but they were not the only ones in this area. Let me show you an image that I pulled up. And this is not a very detailed image. This does not have all the tribes that were pre-Columbus. This has more of the tribes that are after Columbus while it's still being conquered and such. So let me go through a few of these cultures. I'll make it kind of quick just because this is the last day of this week. You already have assignments. You already have reading that you need to do. So I will make this somewhat quicker than normal. Okay, so some of the ones that I wanted to hit upon are very important tribes. So you have the Moche. The Moche were actually northern coastal. They were up here in this area. Now, they were also taken over by the Incas, but they lived about 100 to 700 AD. Then, around the same area, going more into the Northland, sorry, actually, it's not, yeah, northern Peru, up here, you have the Chimu, Chimu, with a tilde on the top. Chimu. They were from between 900 and 1470, which is right about the time of the Incas coming in and taking over that land. Now, this shows the Incas being right here. It's actually not true. They were a little bit higher up. Almost all of Peru was Incan territory. And the reason why I say that is because you also have those that stood up against the Incas, but mixed as well. It's the Chachapoya. Around 900 to 1572 AD, they were in this area. Now, these are interesting people. They are called the warriors of the cloud. Warriors of the cloud. They lived in the cloud forests in northern Peru. And so their structures include the fortress of Cuelap. This, well, I get a better picture. Yeah, let's start here. So remember I showed you Machu Picchu. It's way up in the mountains. Well, Machu Picchu is a huge tourist point. People don't really talk about this one from the Chachapoya. The Chachapoya lived high up in the Andes, and they did have these trails. You can see actually trails that are down here. It's probably where tourists come to see this. But they built in forests on top of the mountains. And the reason why they're called the warriors of the cloud, is because in the high Andes, you have clouds that are constantly covering them. Have you ever been on the top of a mountain and been there when the clouds come in? You get drenched. It's not because it's raining, because the clouds are so full of moisture. So everything is moist at the very top of the mountain. Look at this. So this one, everything has moss grown over it. There are trees in some parts. And yet they were so advanced, they had archways, they had walkways, they had everything you'd find, stonework. Again, some of these tribes, the biggest advancements had to do with their survival. They were at the top of these mountains. They had to have certain things. I would have loved to see this before it all was destroyed. Because I could bet you it's probably one of these buildings that were all stone and then a thatched roof on top, holding it all together. Fascinating. I love this. So this is very close to actually Machu Picchu, except Machu Picchu, let me show this. Go back. There we go. Machu Picchu is down here. I don't know if I can talk my group into coming up here to northern Peru. Okay, so that being said, let's go into some of the other ones. There is the Tiwanaku. The Tiwanaku were 300 to 1000 AD. The Tiwanaku were near the lake of Titicaca. Now Titicaca is down here, still in the Incan Empire, still taken over by the Incas, whatever was left, because again they ended in about 1000 AD, while the Incas came out in the late 300s, early 400 ADs. So yeah. Okay, next one. There's the Wari. It's interesting. The most major civilizations or tribes were basically everywhere the Incas were. So the Incas came over and took over all the major tribes. Interesting. Remember I mentioned the Chimu. This is the Chimu right here, if you're looking at the map. Okay, so you have the Wari people, which had a vast empire right in the middle of Peru. And they're very advanced with terraces and urban planning, which is actually where a lot of the Incas and the tribes afterwards get a lot of their technology when it comes to that. And did they get it from others? Maybe so. I don't know. But let's go on to the next one, which is the Nazca. The Nazca were about 200 BC to 600 AD. And this was in the southern Peru. And also another reason why most of these names are not here is because by the time Columbus came around, they were no longer alive, or they were no longer a tribe. The Incas enveloped certain tribes. It means they took them in and took over that land. So some of the tribes still remain, but most of them were disappeared. Okay, so I'm going to do one more, and then we're going to go over to the most interesting, and it is the Caral. Caral. C-A-R-A-L. This is the oldest one in this area, and this started about 2600 BC to about 1800 BC. And this is the Supa Valley of Peru. So I'm actually not quite sure exactly where it is, but they actually have pyramid structures as well in here. So check that one out. Now, we're going to leave Peru, finally come up north, into the Arawak people. Now, the Arawak were very important because who were the Arawak? They were the ones that were the Taino. So this is an Arawak tribe up down here who climbed the islands and established the Cuba, Dominican Republic, and Haiti, and also Peru. And what's very interesting about them is they were all over the place and they spread out quite a lot in Venezuela and in Guananas. I gotta figure out how to say that country. I don't think I've seen it spelled out before. So, yeah, let's learn that one. So this one is Guianas, Guanas, Guianas. Yes, probably Guianas. I'll look that up. But around the area of Venezuela and the Guianas. Okay, so, and they traveled up. Now, do you see this? It says Carib. Remember what we talked to you about the Carib? They were potentially cannibals who took the Taino people into captivity, brought them back to their islands, and abused them, enslaved them, and such. Now, if you look, the Caribs are also way down here near the Amazon. They too traveled up, and they're right here near the Arawak, and too traveled up. So my question is, did the Arawak come up, mix up here, and then the Carib follow after them? Something I'd really like to know. At the same time, I can't trust that the archaeologists know exactly why that happened as well. Okay, some last ones I'm going to give you, and then we're going to call it quits, is we have the Guarani people inhabited regions in Paraguay, which is down here. So the Guarani, I meant to see, oh, there they are, yeah, near Paraguay, and there's Uruguay. I think this is Uruguay and this is Paraguay. I'd have to look at a map. South American countries, not my biggest strength, but yes, they were nearing the Mapuche area, and they were actually mixed into the Mapuche as well. Some other ones to look at around the Amazon rainforest. So this is the Amazon. As you can see, it spreads out. Now the Amazon itself is technically right here, and it stretches all the way into Peru and then ends. But this is the, I'm trying to get this right. I might butcher it. But this is northern Brazil. Again, Brazil is a large country. Should have some representation here. The name is Yanomami. Yanomami. Yanomani. Yomonoani. And that is not here. And the reason why is because this was also a very large but very former community. They were very much into agriculture. And I don't see them anywhere on this map. Again, these are not the best maps. These are made by man after Columbus, well after Columbus. So we don't actually have the best of maps to pick from. You have a lot of other parts and pieces in here. I'm not going to go through all of them. But when you're going through and doing your studies, find a tribe. There's a tribe that they just found in the Amazon who has not been touched by Western hands or even by that country. Find out what tribe that is. I don't have their name offhand, but find out what tribe that is. Look them up and try to find more information about them. There's also, here's another interesting one. There's a pilot. Come to find out, my editor actually knows this pilot's family. He was a missionary. He came into South America, and we actually have a card on him in the randomized pack. Where's the randomized pack? There's the randomized pack. But I'm 99% sure that I do not have it in this one pack of randomized cards. You'll have to look him up. But he went into this tribe, and how he ended his death, he was actually killed by that tribe. But it was after that they basically dropped their swords and said, we don't, or their weapons, and we don't want to do this anymore. And they actually let Christian missionaries into that area to teach them not to destroy their tribes. Actually, the missionaries are trying to help them preserve their thoughts and ideas and working with them, and also protecting their land, which is quite amazing. So there is so much to learn about South America. I can't tell you a pittance of it because there's so much. And in the United States, they don't do a great job at teaching these things. Holy cow. I was so amazed by how much information is actually out here about all of these tribes spanning from Central America all the way down to the tip down here. Yamani. Wait a minute. Yamani? Nope. That's a different Yamani. The one I was talking about was Yanomami. Y-A-N-O. Sorry. Y-A-N-O-M-A-M-I. Not the same one. And they lived up here near the Amazon. So, yeah, there's a lot of tribes that are not on this image here. So if you missed this image, don't worry about it. You didn't lose much. Just figure out where Peru is, and you'll be able to understand where a lot of these people are. Grab a map while you're listening to this podcast and look at these places that I tell you. I told you they're like North Peru, or the north inside the Andes, the Incas, or Inca area in the northern coastal land of Peru. Those are some of the places that I mentioned. The Arawak is right below the lower Antilles Islands, coming off the Caribbean. Look them up. This is fascinating stuff. Every tribe was very diverse, and yet people like the Mapuche, even though they were very diverse and spread out, they would come together when times that they needed each other and fought together. So, thank you so much for joining me. Next week, I am so excited because we will be talking about age of exploration. And if you're doing ancient civilizations, we're going to be talking about Africa. Fascinating. North America studies on history do not give it justice. It's amazing. You got to be able to understand this because they were one of the more advanced civilizations for a time. My friend, I'm actually going to be bringing him on. He's actually from Kenya, and he has so many things that he knows about African history. He studies it. He loves it. And of course, he was taught it while he was there. And what he says is that when Europeans came in, a lot of the history that is told by Europeans is not completely, I won't say it's false, but it's not completely accurate. And it almost demeans the people of Africa and the great things that they were able to bring up, such as it was the richest continent of the whole world for thousands of years. How is that? Everyone thinks of third world, poor nations. Oh, no. No, we're talking about the gold trade. We're talking about the silver trade. We're also talking about the slave trade. But salt, sugar, I mean, it had everything. It was the epicenter of all markets in pre-Columbia times. So you had the Middle East that would bring their goods into this area. You had Asia that would bring their stuff through the Silk Road over there. Egypt was there. You had the Romans that would use that area as well. You had a lot going on in Northern Africa and even Southern Africa. Most of the stuff that we talk about is actually Western Africa because there's a lot more history that has to do with ancient civilizations. And because in this episode, or this next month coming up, we're going to be talking about African history, but we leave completely out the Egyptian area. And that's because the next month we're going to be focusing on just Egypt. And that's very fascinating as well, because there are other civilizations that are around there that actually came together to make up what Egypt was as we know it. So we're going to go into the things that people talk about in U.S. history, in the United States when teaching history, but a lot of things that people don't talk about. I can't wait to tell you about it. And there's the most amazing economic story in economics, total snorefest, right? No, this is the most amazing story that proves that capitalism does work, socialism hurts the countries, and just giving out money will actually hurt the society. I'll teach you more about it next week when we go into, well, it probably won't be next week. It'll probably be the week afterwards, because we won't get to the Mali Empire until that point. But it's the greatest story on economics and why there's value within the commodities, and some commodities lose their value. So thank you so much for joining me. That's just a little snippet of what you're going to be learning. It is fascinating. I'll make it a little bit more fascinating than I just did. Thanks so much for joining us, and we will catch you next time. Take care. Bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, actually. Take care. Bye.